Joining me here in the studio now to discuss all of that, and of course the Supreme Court decision, and of course Suella Braverman's resignation as well, is our chief political commentator Peter Caldwell, and also Lord David Frost, former chief Brexit negotiator, and also former Cabinet Office Minister as well. Good afternoon to you both. Welcome back again, Peter. Funny, you're going to have quite a busy day. Let's just, first of all, we're going to talk about the Supreme Court ruling. I'd just like to get your reaction, first of all, from you, Lord Frost, about those exchanges between Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer. Initially, actually, they started, just as we went live to the chamber, with Rishi Sunak, with Keir Starmer asking Rishi Sunak about the Intelligence and Security Committee and the new Foreign Secretary, David Cameron, Lord Cameron's role in a Chinese investment firm that may have been engineered by China. An interesting first question to go on, given Suella Braverman's sacking, given her resignation letter, given the Supreme Court ruling, which we then went on to. But why do you think you started with that?
Well, I suppose there are quite a number of things he could have gone on this week, so plenty of targets. I think there is a concern, I wouldn't overstate it, but I think there is a concern that the policy on China ought to be a bit more robust, and the return of David Cameron may be a signal that it isn't going to get any more robust. We'll have to see.
Yeah, it's a concern. We know in Duncan Smith and others who said that as well. Let's talk about the substance, though, that they got into in most of those questions, which was about the Rwanda Supreme Court ruling. Your response, first of all, to the ruling by those 5 judges on the Supreme Court, read out by Lord Reid. We got it basically 2 hours ago. Basically, the policy in principle is legal, as previous courts have said, but in practice, with Rwanda, with the treaties that they've got, the processes there, the likelihood of people to be sent back to their country of origin and face persecution is too great, and therefore the policy is unlawful. Do you think the judges got that right?
I think it's pretty unusual, to be honest, for judges to get into commenting on really what's a foreign policy question, the security and safety and reputableness of Rwanda. And it's only in recent years they've started to make those sort of judgments. However, they've made it, and the government's got to deal with it. And either it acquiesces in it, in which case Rwanda is dead, I think, as a policy, or it's got to decide we're going to legislate to overrule the Supreme Court and push through Rwanda come what may.
Well, that's it. And the Prime Minister did suggest in his answers that he said that he was working on a new treaty with Rwanda, that's something that had been touted in advance, to address the court's concerns, and said, if necessary, I am prepared to revisit our domestic legal frameworks. What he means by that is our signatory to the European Convention on Human Rights, yes?
Well, let's see. It could mean quite a lot of things, and I'm not sure, looking at the Prime Minister's decisions over the last year on a number of things, that he's really up for overruling international law and the court. Let's see. It'd be great if he did, but I'm not. And it's
something
really
a lot of backbench Tory MPs might be looking for. Let's bring in Peter Caldwell, our chief political commentator. It was a little bit messy and scrappy, those exchanges, but I think we got a real taste of the election campaign ahead, didn't we? What did you make of what they had to say?
Very personal attacks. Neither of them was at their best, really, at this PMQs. But certainly lots of, you supported Jeremy Corbyn, you wanted him to be the leader of the Labour Party and Prime Minister, Keir Starmer. That is a very personal attack on him. He's done that a number of times. But certainly quite a number of fronts that Keir Starmer really went for Rishi Sunak on. There was a lot around at the moment. Rishi Sunak, of course, wanted to talk about the economy. He didn't even barely got a mention of the inflation figures.
I mean, again, if you're talking about a policy that's going to actually impact most people, of all the things we're talking about on the show this week, the thing that's going to most impact most people in this country and make a real difference to their lives is inflation.
Yes.
More than halving. Rishi Sunak has met that pledge. Not that it was ever in his power. I mean, it was something that happened. Inflation rate ran up, inflation rate gone down. It's very little to do with government policy. It's external events, but down to 4.6%, a huge jump. Down, a fall that was bigger than the inverted commas experts, they never get it right, expected, but barely getting a mention today.
Yes, indeed, and very interesting as well that whilst Rishi Sunak may want to talk about that, take credit for it, emphasis, of course, on whether it can stop the boats. 33% down. Certainly he will tout as an achievement, but definitely really those attacks on Starmer as well, saying that he's never voted for stronger asylum legislation, for example, that he's soft on this. Interesting, especially in the context of this week and the reshuffle. People are saying the Conservatives have moved more to the centre ground with some of those appointments, like Cameron, but actually a lot of what Rishi Sunak said, I don't think Suella Braverman would disagree with a lot of it, actually.
OK. Let's come back to you, Lord Frost. I mean, the dance steps we've seen over the last week. So Tuesday, last week, we know that the Prime Minister met with David Cameron, as he was then, former Prime Minister, to offer him a job. He accepted the job on the Thursday. Around that time, we had all the letter, the article in the Times newspaper by Suella Braverman, the then Home Secretary, some of the language. I think people like me who agree with the general thrust of what she had to say, unhappy, as many people are with some of the language. She admits even in her resignation letter, she doesn't actually often choose the right words. Gets herself, she's her own worst enemy, a lot of us would think. Then we had the events of the weekend. Then we had the announcement, I think shocking to pretty much everyone other than David Cameron and Rishi Sunak, that David Cameron will be back in the Cabinet as Lord Cameron, as the Foreign Secretary. Suella Braverman out, we've seen her letter. I mean, all of this, we knew that march was taking place on Saturday. We also knew that the Supreme Court was going to make its ruling. It was always very likely, more likely, to go against the government than go with the government. That was the general expectation. Has this all been played in the dance steps? Has this all been choreographed by Rishi Sunak to come to this moment so that he sort of is more in charge of this policy? Or has this just been a tsunami of sort of mess and noise that has hit him and he's dealing with it?
I think it's just a tsunami of mess and noise. I mean, it was only a couple of weeks ago we knew the Supreme Court ruling was coming. Now, the protests obviously have been going for a month or so. I think the reshuffle is an effort to get a grip and make the Cabinet his own. And of course, he's entitled to put in the Cabinet who he wishes. And I hope the government can succeed. But until the government's policies deal with the things that really matter to people, housing, immigration, net zero, tax spend, not just inflation, then it's always going to be aiming off from what people want to hear. And I haven't really heard anything that suggests that's changing.
Well, Suella Braverman's letter, she talked about the Prime Minister betraying on their agreement, she said, and about her giving him support to become leader. She basically says, her support was a pivotal factor in Rishi Sunak winning the leadership the second time after losing it. She points out in her letter to Liz Truss summer last year. But she also, there's a hint that there was this document. There's actually a statement they've actually agreed and he's signed. Very unusual if that is the case. But also she talked about him betraying the promise to the nation to stop the boat. She said he has no appetite for doing what's necessary, no real intention of fulfilling the pledge to the British people, saying that she was ignored over Rwanda and those marches, and saying, someone needs to be honest, your resets have failed, we are running out of time, you need to change course urgently. There is no plan B, she says, if the Rwanda migrant policy is blocked by the Supreme Court. Do you agree with any, all, or none of that?
I agree with most of it. We're definitely running out of time. We're seeing our poll ratings go down and down,
18
bit
points
by
behind
bit.
Labour right now.
Yeah, absolutely. That poll last night shows us a long way behind. And one of the reasons is that a lot of the people who voted for us in 2019 are not planning to vote for us, and they're not doing that because they're not seeing proper Conservative policies that they voted for. And until we get them, I don't really see why that situation is going to change. So I think Suella is right on her issues as Home Secretary to say we need to deliver on what we have promised to do. And today's decision has blocked that. And I think the Prime Minister needs to up the ante and push forward with legislation that puts the government back in control of the borders. But
realistically, that was something that was pointed out in Suella's letter as well, that he's not really willing to do that. I mean, that is the key thing. She says, as on so many other issues, you sought to put off tough decisions in order to minimise political risk to yourself. There is this basic hint that, look, you want to be seen as one of the nice people. It's like, the decision to bring back David Cameron. I have no axe to grind with David Cameron, very personable, very nice man, I thought it was a very competent Prime Minister, in fact. But the idea that he's the solution to whatever the problem is right now means you've completely misidentified what the problem is. There is this sort of urge, it seems, by the sort of the technocratic, let's face it, private school educated establishment elite to say, don't worry your pretty little heads. we're going to be back in charge. We have commentators on the BBC and Sky talk about the grown-ups being back in the room. I think they mean that people like you and me who agitated for Brexit and the like, I think think that we should have strong immigration and border policies. I think they think we're not grown-ups. But this is part of the problem, isn't it? This is one of the reasons why people voted for Brexit, why they voted for Boris, why they went through those survived to 2019 through those 3 horrific years of our parliamentary democracy being undermined, because they felt betrayed by the very people who are now being brought back in power.
Too many of the people in charge in this country, and I don't just mean my party, I mean across parties and institutions, think there was nothing really wrong with the country before the Brexit vote.
They were doing fine.
They were
Cheap
doing
nannies.
all right. Absolutely. The Brexit vote and then the 2019 vote showed a lot of people thought there was something wrong with the country and they wanted a lot of things to change. And at the moment, for a lot of complicated reasons, we are not delivering on that change. And that is why the polls are where they are. And unless we change that, we're going to lose.